Hi, this is Raphael Mudge, the creator of Cobalt Strike. Welcome to Part 7 of Advanced Threat Tactics, Pivoting. So far, we've worked to get a foothold into an environment, conduct post-exploitation, and spread laterally in the network, okay? Some of your objectives will require you to interact with non-Windows systems and to even tunnel third-party tools through Cobalt Strike's beacon. That's what we're going to go through in this lecture. I'm going to show you how to use a SOCKS proxy server to tunnel traffic through a beacon, and we're going to do that in the context of a Metasploit framework exploit and using proxy chains. I'm also going to show you how to turn a compromised system into a redirector using Beacon's reverse pivoting capability, and we're going to talk about a special topic that sounds esoteric, but it really does come up, and that's how to tunnel Beacon over SSH. So first things first, when you're pivoting with Beacon, a couple things to know. You have to speed up your Beacon and make it interactive. So I recommend you use the sleep 0 command to make it so Beacon checks in several times each second. Now, let's talk about pivoting through SOCKS. Here, we have a Windows system calling back to the team server interactively, okay? We spin up a SOCKS proxy server on the team server that is tied to that beacon session. Any proxy-aware application will connect to that SOCKS server on our team server, and the SOCKS protocol will tell the team server where it should initiate a connection to on behalf of that SOCKS-aware application, okay? So the team server initiates a connection to the requested host and port, and what we end up with is the application traffic riding through our beacon traffic and through the compromised system and interacting with the desired target in blue space, okay? That's what proxy pivoting looks like. Now, how do you do this in Cobalt Strike? Well, just type SOCKS, whatever port, inside of a beacon console, and that will create a proxy server on whatever port you specify on the team server that is tied to that specific beacon instance. And you can use SOCKS stop to kill that SOCKS proxy server. Now, over time, you're going to do a lot of proxy pivoting, and you're going to want an easy way to manage this. So if you go to View, Proxy Pivots, you can see all the different pivots that have been set up through the different beacons in Cobalt Strike. Once in a while, you're going to want to use a Metasploit framework module in a target environment. Maybe you'll even find an opportunity to use a Metasploit framework memory corruption exploit. I don't judge. Here's how to make the Metasploit framework tunnel through a Cobalt Strike beacon, okay? The Metasploit framework has a command setg. This is a set global option, okay? And what it does is it sets an option such that it's sticky and applies to all modules that you run from here on out until you unset it, okay? There's an option in Metasploit called proxies. And through that option, you can specify a SOCKS proxy server that the Metasploit framework should send that module's traffic through. So if you do setg proxies, point it to your Cobalt Strike team server, you will make the Metasploit framework tunnel its traffic through that SOCKS proxy. In effect, tunneling Metasploit through that beacon. Okay, let's take a look at tunneling the Metasploit framework through Cobalt Strike's beacon. First, let's go interactive, and let's stand up a proxy pivot. Under pivoting, SOCKS server, 8888. That's the port we'll use. Looks good. And let's go to View Proxy Pivots. Let's go ahead and hit the tunnel button. And we'll use this one-liner to force the Metasploit framework to tunnel through our beacon. So let's come over here to a console, type MSF console, and let's go ahead and paste in the one-liner. And now, anything we do in Metasploit, well, almost anything, will go through our beacon. Okay? So let's use the SMB version module in Metasploit, and let's sweep through our 10.10.10 network. And just to keep me sane, let's set the threads to 64. And let's do exploit-j to fire it off. And this module will sweep port 445 inside of the network beacon gives us a foothold to. And we'll start learning about targets that are present. And you can see from some of this information, it is an older test lab. And there we go. Our sweep of the network is complete, and now we've identified a few targets. Let's try the venerable MS0867. And we'll do it against the Josh Dev system up here. That's this one. And the whole purpose of this is not to impress you with my ability to ride through the Metasploit Framework console. It's to show you that we can use Metasploit exploits by tunneling them through Beacon. So that looks good to me. Let's go ahead and fire it, or let's do show options. And let's go ahead and fire it. You can see we're sending the stage, and again, all this is going through Beacon. Okay, let's just do sessions-i1, whoops, a shell. Let's see where we're connected to, and what you will see is that 10.10.10 is connected to us on port 4444. So that is an example of tunneling a Metasploit framework exploit through Beacon. Now let's talk about pivoting with proxy chains. Proxy chains is an application that allows you to force a non-proxyware application to use a proxy. The way it works is you have to edit a global configuration file, and that is etcproxychains.conf, and make it point to your SOCKS proxy server that you want to use. And then you can do proxy chains, any command you want, to run that command and make it tunnel traffic through the specified proxy server in proxychains.conf. For example, here's what that looks like. If I do proxy chains SSH user at target, proxy chains will create SOCKS traffic to the team server and make the SSH program become proxy aware. The SSH program is our application traffic, and that application traffic will go through our beacon traffic, and it will come out through the pivot host, and the pivot host will interact with the target system on our behalf. So that's what pivoting with proxy chains looks like. Okay, let's demonstrate proxy chains. Here's the scenario. We're on a developer system, and we had to chain a few levels to get to this particular developer system. Okay? Now we started logging keystrokes, and we started capturing screenshots of user activity. And it looks like the user is editing some kind of source code. And we want to get that source code. Okay? Fortunately, from our keystroke logging, we have a username and password. So what we need to do is jump onto the system, figure out where the target's connected to. And we can do that with a netstat. Okay. And we can see that they're connected to this system on port 22. So that's our candidate to connect to. So we're going to use proxy chains to get to that particular server. So let's go ahead and do it. First, let's make this beacon interactive. Now, when you change the sleep time in a SMB beacon, what you end up doing is bubbling a task up to the parentmost beacon to change its sleep time, okay? So now that the parent is interactive, we should be able to create a SOCKS proxy on this particular system over here. So let's do port 3333, hit launch. And let's head over to a terminal. And let's get the IP address of my team server because I'm not going to remember it. There we go. And let's edit etc proxychains.conf. And we're going to make proxy chains go through the proxy server on our team server, port 3333. Cool. Now let's get our target information. 192.168.57.18. User is Jay Sokol. Password is Josh Rocks. So let's do proxy chains, SSH, Jay Sokol, at, paste, and there we go. This SSH connection is riding down that pivot chain and through that final Linux system. And here we are. We're able to navigate around the system, find stuff. Oops. Probably didn't want to do a find slash. But we're able to navigate around the system and go looking for things. So that's an example of using proxy chains with Cobalt Strike's beacon. Let's talk about reverse pivoting, turning a compromised system in blue space into a redirector for some sort of service in red space. You can do this with the rport forward command. This command sets up a reverse port forward. The first option is the listen port, the port that the compromised system will receive connections on, and the second parameters are the forward host and forward port. These parameters specify where Cobalt Strike should forward any connections that come to this listen port on the compromised system. You can stop a reverse port forward with the rport forward stop command as well. One thing to note is that you have to take into account whether or not there's a host-based firewall on the target and create an exception or disable the firewall for this mechanism to work. Okay, a Cobalt Strike feature that builds on top of reverse port forwards are pivot listeners. A pivot listener is a Cobalt Strike listener that calls home through a beacon session, in effect, making the compromised system a redirector for that payload handler. To stand this up, just go right-click on a beacon, go to Pivoting, Listener. Okay? And here, you can give the listener a name. You're going to specify the payload as a foreign listener because this is basically an alias for a payload handler elsewhere, maybe in another Cobalt Strike instance, maybe in Metasploit, that we're going to create a reverse port forward for. You're going to specify the listen host and listen port, which is your compromised system that is acting as a redirector. And you're going to specify the remote host and remote port, which is a system in red space that is ready to receive a payload, the payload that we specify. Okay? And here's what this looks like graphically. We have the remote host in red space that is listening on the remote host and remote port that we set. Okay? We have a compromised system in blue space. That is our listen host. We can attack a target in blue space and reference the pivot listener. And when we do, the target will connect to the listen host that is our redirector. The listen host will tunnel that connection back to the team server, and the team server will in turn route that traffic on to whatever forward host and forward port we specify. Okay? So that is the concept of a pivot listener. Okay, let's take a look at using Beacon's reverse port forwarding capability to turn a compromised system into a redirector. Here we are with our foothold in the Acme network. We have the file server chained through the What-A-Hog system. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a redirector out of this system, the file server, that points to port 80 over here in Cobalt Strike. So let's go pivoting, listener, and this will create a reverse port forward and a foreign listener in one step. So let's go ahead and call this redirector, file server H2P beacon. Make it a little bit more short. We'll just do an R like that. Listen host 10.10.10.4. We'll listen on port 80. And we're going to forward all traffic over to ads.losenolove.com, port 80. Okay. Hit save. And there we go. Now, very important, don't make the mistakes I've made. Do a sleep 0. The sleep 0 will make this beacon interactive, or at least its parent, so that things are pretty responsive. Cool. Now that we've got a port forward pointing over here, let's go ahead and create a listener and tell it that it's 10.10.10.4, port 80 is where it stages. And we'll call this redirector HP beacon actual. Doesn't matter, configuration's same anyways. 10.10.10.4. Looks good. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and make an attack. We'll do the HTML application, and we'll tie it to our listener configuration. It goes through the redirector. Hit generate. Call evil.hta. And let's go ahead and host this on our web server. Okay, as evil.hta. And let's point this towards our redirector, 10.10.10.4. And there we go. Now, let's go fishing. Let's go to attacks, spearfish. And what we're going to do is use the same template from earlier in this course. And we're going to embed the URL of the file that goes through our redirector. I guess we could just as well attach it. And let's go ahead and hit send and kick off our phishing attack. The main point is we've just kicked off a phishing attack where the malicious content is hosted inside the target's network, and our initial callback comes to a system inside the target's network. Okay? So let's come over here to ads.losenolove.com, go to weblog, and let's watch what happens when Target decides to check their email. Okay? So I'm Target. I'm going to open up my email. And you can see a hit on the HTML application. I'm going to allow it to run. And there's our stager. And here we go. We now have a foothold in the Acme network going through the file server. So the file server is our redirector. Okay, let's talk about tunneling beacon over SSH. Here's the scenario. I have a system in red space that can talk to a Linux system in blue space, okay? That Linux system can reach a target I want access to. Now, presumably, I have the information I need to attack that target. Either the information to establish a trust relationship, or maybe an exploit if I want to tunnel that through. But for this, we're going to assume we have trust material. Okay? So the main idea is I want to be able to attack that target in blue space through this SSH tunnel I create from red space. Let's go through how to do that. To tunnel beacon over SSH, connect to the Unix target in blue space, the blue pivot, and make sure that you enable dynamic port forwarding when you do so. That's the -D flag followed by a port in SSH. And what the -D flag does is stands up a SOCKS proxy server that forwards any connections it receives through the SSH tunnel. Now, on the red pivot system, the system that initiated the SSH connection to the blue system, forward port 445 through the dynamic port forward SOCKS server we just stood up. SOCAT is really nice for this. Just do SOCAT, listen on port 445, and have the fork option in there so you can take multiple connections. And then just do SOCKS4:127001:, put in the target you want to reach on the distant end, and port 445, okay? The port 1080 piece is implicit when you do SOCKS4 this way. There is another option in SOCAT if you need to bind your dynamic port forward to a port other than 1080. If not, this works pretty well. Now what you essentially have is a system in red space with listening on port 445, and anything that comes to that 445 is going to reach your target in blue space. Okay? Now to attack that target, just run a beacon on an attacker-controlled host. It's in your best interest to make sure you run it as administrator. Okay? So this is a beacon in red space, but it's going to do your bidding for you. Now, from that attacker-controlled beacon, what you're going to do is load trust material into your access token that Windows will use when it tries to talk to our target system through a port forward. Okay? So you can do that a variety of ways. You can use make token to create a token, either for a local account or a domain account. And you can even use the pass the hash technique we talked about in the last lecture. Either one is okay. Now, once you've loaded trust material, attack the system. Ideally, with an attack that's going to go over port 445. That might mean creating a service with the SC command. It might mean using psexec or psexec PowerShell. Here's what this looks like in a picture form. We have our red space beacon that is connecting to our port forward. And our port forward is, again, sending that traffic over the SSH tunnel. And the pivot host is directing that traffic to our target. And that's it. That's how you attack a Windows system via beacon through an SSH tunnel. Okay, let's take a look at tunneling beacon over an SSH tunnel. So first, here's my Windows system in red space calling back to my Cobalt Strike team server. Okay, I have it calling back interactively, and I want to essentially use this beacon to attack another Windows system with known credentials through an SSH tunnel. So what we're going to do is first, let's note what the IP address of my pivot system is, 192.168.1.2. And let's go ahead and create a dynamic port forward on port 1080. And let's connect to the Linux system that is notionally in blue space. Okay? And what we have on port 80 is essentially a SOCKS proxy server, and any traffic that goes through this SOCKS proxy will be fulfilled by the distant end Linux system. Okay? Cool. Now, let's go ahead and hit Control-Shift-T. And what we're going to need to do is create a SOCAT relay that basically listens on port 445 and sends anything that comes in on port 445 through our SOCKS server that's running on the same system on port 1080. That's the default. And we want to make it forward to our actual target in BlueSpace, our target that this Linux system can reach. Because if you look, our Linux system here is actually dual homed. Okay? And the target we want to reach is 172.168.20.174, and it can reach it. So let's go ahead and put in the information for it. 172.168.20.174, 445. Okay, cool. Now, anybody that hits us on hits our system 192.168.4, excuse me, 192.168.1.2 on port 445, we'll find that traffic sent through this local SOCKS proxy server destined on the distant end to reach this host and port, which is ultimately our target. Okay? The main thing you need to know is if we attack the team server's IP address, if we attack that, it's the same as attacking the system on the other end of the SSH tunnel. So we've got our beacon going. Let's go ahead and make a token for a user we know is a local administrator on the distant end. We could also do a pass the hash as well if we had the password hash for that system for an administrator user. And let's verify that those creds work. They do. Cool. Now let's go and just do psexec PowerShell to deliver a payload without touching disk to 192.168.1.2. And let's deliver an SMB beacon because that will stage over port 445 and it will communicate over port 445. And using psexec, we're attacking the system over port 445. And there we go. We've just gained control of this Windows 10 system by riding through that SSH tunnel. Okay? So now we find ourselves in a strange new network tunneled over SSH. Okay, that wraps up the pivoting lecture. In this lecture, we talked about tunneling traffic through Beacon using the Metasploit framework or proxy chains in the SOCKS proxy pivoting. We talked about how to turn a compromised system into a redirector in reverse pivoting. And I showed you how to tunnel Beacon over SSH. What's really cool about each of these techniques is you can mix them and match them in many different ways to get to some very tough targets in very tough situations. When I think about hacking and the pieces that are interesting to me, this is certainly some of my favorite stuff. I hope you enjoyed it too. This concludes part 7 of Advanced Threat Tactics.